Hey guys, welcome to the webinar today. I'm so excited you're on the line. I know that you have a lot of work to do, a lot of things to do, and so I appreciate taking the time to be here. It's a great topic. We're going to talk about why there are so many male ministry leaders who just don't get the help that they need to really thrive in ministry. And it's something that I see and have seen in my own life and see in many of the male ministry leaders that I work with. So we're going to talk about that today. And I want to really see how we can help you. And so, before we kind of jump in, let me talk about myself a little bit. My name is Rhett Smith. And what are some things maybe that are important to know about me? Well, first of all, I'm a full-time licensed marriage and family therapist, and I have a private practice in Plano, Texas, where I work primarily with couples, work with a lot of men, work with a lot of families here in my office. The entire family gets in here and kind of help them work through some things. And then we're working with a lot of pastors, a lot of people in ministry, and I'll tell you in a second why that's important to me. And then also, I'm a therapist at a marriage intensive called the Hideaway Experience in Amarillo, Texas, and I love working there. Also, I'm a writer. I've read a couple of my books, The Anxious Christian and What It Means to Be a Man. What It Means to Be a Man is my latest book. It came out in March. And though the book is not aimed specifically at people in ministry, there are a lot of things in there that I think are helpful to men who are in ministry, and do a lot of writing for the Fuller Youth Institute and Relevant Magazine. And the last thing I do is I pastor a little bit, not full-time, not on staff anymore. Grew up in a pastor's home where my father and mother were church planners in Phoenix, Arizona. And so I've been volunteering in ministry for most of my life. And been on staff of churches for about 15 years. My longest stint, I was a college pastor in Los Angeles at Bel Air Presbyterian Church between 2002 and 2008, and moved from Los Angeles to Texas in 2008. And over the last few years, I've been doing a lot of speaking at churches, speaking at church staff, doing parenting classes, marriage classes, and spending some time really helping pastors and counsel them. And so I love working with people in ministry is something that I'm passionate about because it's something that I've been a part of. It's been part of my whole life. I know the pitfalls of being in ministry. I know the ups and downs, and so I really want to come alongside people in ministry and really help them. And more specifically, I've had a real passion to help men in ministry. Men are often the last people to get help because of all the stigmas. We're going to talk about that in a second. And so I really have a desire to help guys in ministry thrive. And so I'm really glad you're on the line today. So let's just, jump in here and begin to talk about this thing, why men in ministry don't get the help they need and why it keeps them from thriving. And I'm going to reference a couple times a book that I love by a guy named Edwin Friedman. The book is called The Failure of Nerve, Leadership in the Age of the Quick Fix. Amazing author, amazing books. He was a marriage and family therapist in New York, also a rabbi, and wrote quite extensively on how family systems, what happens in the family, is played out in the church. Very insightful stuff, and this is just one of the books that I recommend. The other one that I really recommend is Generation to Generation, where he looks at the emotional process that takes place both in families and also the church and synagogue. And, one of the things that he writes really is that one of the most important things that helps families endure and thrive, and really organizations, specifically in church and ministry, is a leader who is well differentiated. And that's a 50-cent word that people often throw around, and what it simply means is a leader who's well differentiated really knows kind of where they begin and end in relationship to others. They have healthy boundaries. They don't rely on people around them to really make them who they are. They don't rely on people around them to constantly affirm them. Instead, they are differentiated. They stand apart. How they lead is built on their own deep sense of self, their deep inner core, their deep sense of who God says they are, that truth about how God sees them. And that's real difficult for many leaders. Many leaders thrive on people-pleasing. Many leaders thrive on other people telling them how well their sermon was, or how well how great a leader they are. The joke is, and the stories go, why is it that a pastor can preach a sermon or do something and 99 people will say how great it was, and that one person brings criticism, and we're crushed, and we spend all of our energy trying to please that one person. And, it's not surprising that many people in ministry find themselves struggling to please others constantly. And they don't become the well-differentiated leader that Edwin Friedman talks about that makes people so successful, leading, a leadership leading position. And so we're going to talk about this idea of self-differentiation just briefly as we go along, but really going to help you understand what are some barriers that get in the way of guys getting help in ministry, and what are some things you can do about it. So, as I said, we're going to show you today a couple of things. We're going to show you 4 reasons why I think ministry leaders don't get the help they need. I'm going to talk about why I believe every ministry leader needs a personal vision statement to guide their life. I'm going to talk about why ministry leaders often lose their identity and how they can reconnect to it. And I'm going to talk about why it's so important for a ministry leader to take care of themselves. When we don't take care of ourselves very well, we can't really take care of people around us, people that we've been called to take care of. So we're going to look at those things today, and I'm super excited that you're on the line, and let's just jump in. So first of all, what are some barriers to getting help? Well, there's a lot. We can rattle off a bunch of things, a lot of reasons why men in ministry don't get the help they need, but there's 4 that I see time and time again in the men that I work with who are in ministry. And some of these, probably all of these, I've really experienced as well when I really, in the beginning of my ministry, struggled to get help that I need. So 4 things. Number 1 is, when you're in ministry, we become so outwardly focused on the needs of others that it often is done to the detriment of ourselves. Now, first of all, hear me out. It is great to be focused on needs of others. That's why we're called to ministry. We're called to serve. We're called to help others. But if we're so focused on others, eventually we get burned out, and we haven't done the work to take care of ourselves. In fact, sometimes being outwardly focused on others is an excuse to really not look at ourselves and the issues that we have. It's easier to look at what other people have, the issues that they have, the struggles that they have. It's harder to look at our own selves and the struggles that we have and the issues that we have. And so one of the reasons we don't get help is that we're outwardly focused on the needs of others, and we just don't think about ourselves often, or we're fearful to get the help that we need. And so we just focus on others. And again, in ministry we're called to do that, but there has to be some type of balance. We have to also look at ourselves, our issues, our struggles, so that we can better minister to those, and so that our outward focus is healthier. The second reason that I see often is that men in ministry often see getting help as a sign of weakness, that somehow if they reach out, get help, or declare they need help, they're going to be seen as incompetent in their ministry. And it's often seen just in our, male macho culture as a weakness to get help. Men should be able, we tell ourselves, to take care of everything, have every answer that they need, fix things. And when we can't, many people in our culture, or many men in our culture, see that as a sign of weakness. And ultimately, that can lead to a lot of issues. Third issue that I see often is just the fear of being exposed. And by what I mean by that is this fear of, oh my gosh, what if people realize I don't have all the answers? What if people realize I'm not as competent as I thought I was? What if people realize that I'm scared to fail? What if people realize that, sometimes I'm anxious as a leader? What if people realize that? What will they think about me? And so there's this fear of being exposed, and we guard ourselves and protect ourselves, and we don't want to be vulnerable or seen as not, being able to handle everything that comes our way. And then the last thing that I see is getting help. So, for example, counseling is just often not seen as a measurable and quantifiable thing to do for many leaders, especially those who adopt some type of business practice mindset in their ministry. In business, in business you can count numbers and you can quantify things and you can see immediate results. And when we put that into our ministries, we look for things that are easily accessible and quantifiable. We can count attendance on a Sunday or a Wednesday night, or in an event, we can count the number of people who have professed to, be a follower of Christ. We can count up, budget numbers. We can, set goals, and we can measure progress in many ways. But to get help sometimes, that's a difficult thing because we don't always see the immediate results. And so many ministry leaders, many men especially, they want a quick fix. In counseling or getting help is not a quick fix. And so we don't often get the help that we need. Now, those are some of the barriers that I see. And so what happens then when these barriers really inhibit us getting the help that we need, when it inhibits men getting the help they need in ministry? Well, a few things. I think what it does is it continues this thing of ministry leaders who are people pleasers, who just want to please people, and they overextend themselves, and they have unhealthy boundaries, and they can't say no, and eventually leads to burnout. And I don't have to get into all the stats here because you've probably heard them. The number of, and the rate and statistics of ministry leaders who are get out of ministry because of the high level of burnout is really staggering. I've seen a lot of different numbers. Some of the numbers that I've seen in the last year or so, and I'm sure depending on the study they fluctuate, but I've seen, numbers that say that the average youth pastor, for example, in the United States stays on average somewhere around 12, 13 months before they leave from burned out or, sometimes even just leaving the ministry as a whole. I've seen numbers that the average full-time lead pastor, head pastor, is somewhere around 18, maybe to 21 months before they're burned out or leave the ministry that they thought they were called to or believe that they were called to. So the numbers are high, and you might be feeling that as well in your own ministry. Also, when we don't get the help that we need, it results in a lot of leaders who are just never able to ask for help, period, in ministry. And so you see a lot of ministry leaders not being able to delegate, fear of letting go of some control in ministry, fear of not handling everything themselves, and that becomes exhausting. Another thing you see is when we don't get the help that we need, many ministry leaders, they hold others at arm's length, and they adopt this I'm tough, invulnerable exterior. And you've probably experienced that. There's a lot of leaders who come across as inauthentic. You don't really feel like you know them. You don't really feel like they're real in some ways, and they put on this air of everything is under control, I have things perfect, and that's difficult to connect with that type of leader. But that's what happens when we don't get the help that we need. When we're not honest with ourselves, we're not able to be honest with the people that we minister to and serve. And last, we don't get the help we need. I think it continues this idea that, I have to find a quick fix. I got to find something that I can do to solve the problem in my ministry right away. I got to find quick answers that I can measure, and we don't see the value. And here's the words of who I love, the author and pastor Eugene Peterson. He says we don't see the value of the long obedience in the same direction. That's the name of one of his books, by the way. And to be a disciple, we have to head in the same direction. We have to be obedient, and it takes a long time. It's a long journey. And to get help often is that long obedience in the same direction and getting the help that we need. And that's not a quick fix. And so when we don't get the help that we need, and we don't get counseling because it's not a quick fix, then we just keep doing things that we think will solve the problem right here right now. Give me the immediate solution. And we never get the help we need long term. And so that's kind of what happens, I believe, when men don't get the help that they need in ministry. It results in all kinds of issues. And it's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for the people that you serve. And sometimes it results in several different stereotypes of leaders. And as you look at this list of leaders, I wonder if you've identified as being a leader like this, or if people who know you in ministry see you often maybe as a leader like this. And there's different stereotypes. So these are really some of the ones that I come across most often when I work with pastors. And there's the stereotype of the angry leader. That's the leader, the guy who's just on a short fuse. He's just always angry, about to blow. Feels like something's always going deeply wrong right underneath the surface. And that angry leader, you've seen people in ministry like that. And the people who work for a guy like that, they're fearful to talk to him. They're fearful to confront him. They're fearful to really call him to task or to even some type of healthy critique. The guy who's the angry leader often is above accountability often in ministry, which puts him in a very dangerous place. There's also the stuck leader, and that's the leader who just seems like he can't make change in not only his own life, but the life of the ministry. He's just stuck. It seems like nothing is going anywhere. Then there's the passive leader. It's a little different than stuck in that things are happening, but he's not really making choices or making decisions. He's passively letting his life and ministry happen to him. Then there's the workaholic leader, which is probably one we most often see in ministry, and that's the ministry leader who, is always talking about how many hours he works and how much service he's doing and how many things he's how many things he's involved in, how many committees he's running, and how many people he goes out and connects with, and he he works himself to death and wears it as a badge of honor, working 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And I don't have to tell you that causes huge problems not only to his life, but destroys families in the process. And then last, there's the emotionally absent leader. It's kind of a leader who gets up and preaches and teaches and just is kind of like a robot. Seems to be disconnected from the people that he ministers to. Maybe lacks some type of emotion, some type of empathy. And those are just some of the stereotypes I see in the men I work with in ministry. And those are all things that men can work through if they get the help that they need. And if they don't, if you don't get the help you need, you stay stuck in this place and you become a stereotype like this. And I don't want you to be stuck in a place like this. And I know many people who love you and care about you and are in ministry with you don't want you to be stuck in a place like this. And so those are some of the stereotypes. And, I kind of break it down to this. I don't like to often break things down into two different categories, but to me, I kind of see life this way in the men that I work with and the men that I work with who are in ministry. There are men who are life givers and men who I say are life takers. And here's what I want you to imagine. Imagine walking into a church on let's say a Sunday, and it could be a church in a church building or some type of community. And you come across two different types of men who are in ministry. You come across a guy who's a life giver. He's energizing, he's passionate, he's encouraging, he's curious, he listens. It literally seems like he breathes life into other people. When you're around him, you feel new, you feel energized. You feel like not only did you have a great encounter with this person, but literally you experience Christ because of this encounter with this person. He's a life giver. And then compare that to the life taker. He's the minister, the leader, that you're around who's discouraging. He doesn't have much passion. He doesn't listen. He's not curious. Thinks about himself a lot. Literally, it feels like life is sucked out of you when you're around him. And you don't feel like when you walk away that you're a better person, that was a great exchange. You don't feel like you've experienced Christ through that interaction. So there's a life giver and a life taker. And there's too many men in ministry who are life takers, and it's unhealthy. And I really want to encourage men to be life givers. I want you to be a life giver. I want people to walk away saying, man, that was a great conversation. I feel energized and passionate. I feel really encouraged. Even if it was a hard conversation, people walk away feeling like, I feel like I could go after life. I could tackle life. I feel like, man, I want to talk to that person more. So it's life givers and life takers. And the question is, what kind of person are you? Who do you want to be in ministry? One of the things that Edwin Friedman writes at length in the book is that a lot of leaders spend a lot of time really gorging themselves on data and technique, and by technique means skill. So in ministry, you think about it, they spend time crafting their sermon and going to conferences and counting numbers and buying books and reading books and doing everything that they can to, really become better at their craft. But it's really focused all on skill and data. And he says what happens in the process, that it's really an excuse for many leaders to not look at themselves. But the single most important factor in being a leader is leaders who look at themselves and look at their issues and look what's going on in their life and work on those things. That all the data and all the technique is not going to help you become a great leader. It may assist you in some way, but it's not going to hide the fact that you haven't looked at yourselves and that you're bringing your own junk and your own issues into your leadership position. And so we need more leaders, he says, who are able to look at themselves and to really face themselves. And the leader who's able to do that, then skills and technique and things will be helpful in ministry. But too many men in ministry are gorging themselves on conferences and books and blogs and reading data and trying to acquire the latest, skill that's going to help them be a better pastor or minister or leader. And it's all an excuse often not to look at themselves. It's a dangerous place, as Friedman says. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong when a leader is not able to look at themselves. Men can end up in affairs. They can end up in some type of addiction to porn or alcoholism or workaholism. They can end up in a marriage that's disconnected, a family life that's disconnected, all kinds of issues, depression, anxiety. And, we're going to look at some of the things that I think if you're in ministry and you're a man, that you can begin to do different. There's a lot of things. I'm going to focus on 3 things today that I think are essential. And these are things that I know work because these are things that I've worked not only with just men in general, but I've worked with men in ministry over these 3 things and really use these to help them face themselves and begin to look at themselves and to come up with a plan to work on some things that will make them a more effective leader. So we're going to jump in and we're going to move pretty fast today. And so I recommend a couple of different things. One is either you can just kind of listen and, take some mental notes, and I'll have exercises at the end of each of these 3 things that you can work on when the webinar is over. Or you can get a pen and paper out and jot notes as we go. But don't feel like you have to memorize everything as we cruise along here. So number one of the things that I find that is most important that men in ministry do is they need to create a personal vision statement. Many people in ministry, they create vision statements and mission statements for their church, for their organization, for the ministry they oversee, but they don't have one for their personal life. And if you don't have a vision for how you want to live your life, you're going to perish. In fact, in the book of Proverbs, they talk about that without a vision, people perish. And I find that men that don't have a vision for their own personal life, not only do they perish and wither away and become burned out and exhausted and depressed and anxious, the people around them perish. A man without a vision is in a marriage where maybe the marriage perishes. A father without a vision is in a parenting relationship where maybe that relationship perishes and disappears as well. You need to have a vision for your life. And there's 2 ways you can go about this. 2 different exercises I'm going to walk you through. And so the first one I'm going to walk you through is I want you to begin to look at and imagine what your perfect day looks like. And then second, I want you to create a vision and a mission statement. And so what is that? How are we going to do this? What does it look like? Well, first of all, let's think about what a perfect day looks like for you. And I get it. It sounds like a crazy thing. When someone had me do this exercise, I thought, this is crazy. I'm not going to do it. Like, number one is, who has a perfect day? And then 2, who am I, or why am I entitled to have a perfect day? And I think those questions were actually me making excuses for myself, and I was really missing the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise was to begin to look at my day and just think about, what do I want my day to look like? If I had a vision for my day, a perfect day, what would that look like? And so I began the exercise, and what was amazing, I crafted 4 to 5 pages in detail of what this vision was for my perfect day. And there's a lot of different questions you can ask in your perfect day. You can ask endless questions. Some of the things could be like, what time do you get up and go to bed? And what kind of ministry work are you engaged in? In your perfect day, what kind of ministry are you doing? What does your day look like? What hobbies are you participating in? How, where, and when are you spending time with your loved ones? If you're married, like with your wife, and if you have kids, with your kids, and what kind of people are you surrounding yourself with in your personal life and in your ministry, and where do you feel most connected to God? And what are the places maybe that you also feel most disconnected from God? But we're going to, there are questions you can ask, but we're thinking about what does your perfect day look like? And I'll give you an example of what I kind of came up with, and this will kind of help you think about it for your own life. But as I begin to write, I realized that my perfect day starts at 5 a.m. So the first thing I do is put on my running shoes and I head out the door and I go for a long run. Some days it's 3 miles, some days it's 10, some days it's 20. Depends on the day, depends on what I'm training for. But running is essential for me clearing my head, for me kind of managing my own issues, my own anxiety. It helps me really, really slow down. It helps me connect to God. It makes me start the day off in just a healthy and energized place. And so I'll go for a run, sometimes with music, sometimes without, sometimes with a podcast, and sometimes just in silence. I'll just run. And I'll spend time with God praying and thinking through issues in my life and things that I need to work on. And it's a great experience for me. Then I come home, depending on how long the run is, around 6:30, and I'm trying to eat healthy, so I make a green smoothie and our Vitamix there and kind of settle in for the day, and my wife and kids get up and we make breakfast together and we sit down and eat and we talk about our day and we try to connect before the morning, goes off in all of its crazy directions. And then I get ready for work and then I take my daughter to school and drop her off about 7:45, and then I head into the coffee shop for a couple hours and I sit and I read and I study and I work on projects and I write, and sometimes I'll meet with people for coffee. And I know my perfect day in counseling that 5 or 6 clients is about perfect. I know that I have the energy to give my all of my effort to those 5 or 6 clients. If I have too many clients, like 7, 8, 9, or 10, then I know I'm not at my best. So I try to manage my day, my perfect day, with 5 or 6 clients. And so I start seeing clients around 10, 11 o'clock. And, I usually finish up around 4 or 5 in my perfect day. And then I head home, hang out with my family, maybe play outside. We cook dinner together. We sit down for dinner and hang out. And then we just, after dinner, my kids love to wrestle or play games. We hang out. And then for those of you who do have kids, you know how crazy it is to get people in bed at the right time. And so we wrestle and we play up in our house upstairs, and we read Bible stories and read books, and we pray together. And then I get them in bed around 8, 8:30. And then my wife and I will spend a couple hours at night just hanging out. We'll be working on our own projects together. We might be reading a book. We might be watching one of our favorite shows. We might be working on some issues in our marriage or trying to tackle a budget. Or we might just be talking about our dreams and our day and where things are going well. That's what my perfect day looks like. And my perfect day ends about 10 o'clock. Get in bed and read for about a half hour. Lights out at 10:30. That is my perfect day. That's the detail I'm talking about. And as you do that exercise, a couple of questions I have for you. Does your typical day right now, the one you're living, match up with your perfect day? And why or why not? So where are the disconnects? This is why this exercise is so helpful. As I looked at my perfect day, I realized it looked almost nothing like the day I was living, and that was a problem. And so one of the first things I did was go, where are the disconnects, which is question number 2. What's the first thing you would have to do differently right now to begin to move towards your perfect day? So the first thing that I did was I started going to bed earlier because I knew my perfect day wasn't going to start on a good note, unless I got to bed earlier. So I started going to bed at 10, 10:30, which allowed me to get up at 5, sometimes 5:30. And so that's what I did. What would you do? What's the first thing you could do to more line up your perfect day that you wrote down, that you imagined? What would you have to do? What's one thing you could do? And then my question is, what's keeping you from doing it? What are some of the barriers maybe in your ministry that keeps you from having the perfect day? Sometimes the barriers are fear that we're going to try it, we're going to fail. Sometimes the barriers and things that are keeping us from doing it are the idea that we don't deserve to have a perfect day or to enjoy our work. Or sometimes the barriers are it's too hard to work for us. It's not a quick fix, and so we don't do it at all. So that's the first exercise, imagining your perfect day. Second, in creating a personal kind of vision statement is let's look at just creating a vision statement in and of itself. And if you were in my office and I was working with you or, working with you on Skype or something, I'd have you write down 50 to 60 things, but for the sake of time, I'm going to have you write down 10 things about you that make you you. So what would your friends say? Or maybe if you're married, your spouse, or what would your kids say or people in ministry say? What are things that make you you, make you, who you are? What are those qualities and characteristics? And start with the most simple and basic ones, the obvious. Well, you're a man. You are in ministry. You like sports maybe. You live in this state or that state. You love eating this food. You are an encourager. You like being around people. You love to run. You love music and this type of music. I mean, what are the things? Are you into this seminary or this school? What are some of those things that make you who you are? You like to go bowling with people. I mean, I'm just, listing some things here you could put. There's all kinds of stuff. And what you do is you put this list together, and it's easier with 50 or 60 things rather than 10. As you look at that list, you start looking for what are the themes that jump out at you. What are the common things, the common issues, not issues, but what are the common features or characteristics or qualities that emerge? And you pull those things aside and you look at those things and you start to realize those are really your core values. So what happened to me in this exercise was 4 things jumped out at me that were really obvious. Because in my list of 50 to 60 things, these things were grouped in I had 7 or 8 of these apiece. So the first thing that jumped out for me was faith. Faith was important. Faith made up some of the people that I hung out with. It was a quality of some of the communities that I participated in. It was also part of this idea of just like spiritual practices that I had, like prayer, spending time in silence. As a Christian, my faith is really important, my relationship with God, and so that theme really jumped out, this idea of faith. The second theme that jumped out for me was this idea of family and friends. A lot of the things that make me me are tied up in my friendships and my relationships with people. I care about people. So that was another theme. And then another theme that jumped out was this idea of wellness or health. I love running. I love activity. I love doing things with my family that are active. I love eating healthy because I feel better. I love getting sleep and feeling rested. And so wellness was another theme. The fourth theme, which was interesting, was this idea of simple living. I love simplicity. I don't like clutter. I don't like mess, like in my house or my office. I like things to have a place. I'm a little OCD probably in that way. And I like to keep life pretty simple and not get overwhelmed with too much stress or adding on more things than I can handle. So those were four themes that emerged. And so what happened was I looked at those four things and I started to ask myself, are these qualities that make me me, are they lived out in my everyday? So looking at your themes, are those things that you live out in your everyday? Are those core values things that are lived out in your ministry or the work that you do? How come? Why or why not? And again, what's the first thing you'd have to do right now to have these core values lived out in your everyday life or in your ministry? Like, for an example, for me, since I like the things to be simple, I realized I had to start saying no to some things that were coming my way. Start saying no to some projects, some really good stuff I had to start saying no to. And I had to start making some decisions thinking about my family first as well, since family and friends are really important rather than thinking about my work. And so what things would you have to do differently to live those core values out in your everyday life? And so here's what I want you to do. It's a practice exercise. And you can do this after the webinar to kind of do it while we're talking. Number one, I want you to work on your perfect day. Write that down. And number two, I want you to brainstorm all the things that make you you. And spend some time writing down a huge list, 40 to 60 things. And then I want you to identify the core values that emerge. And usually there's going to be 3, 4, 5 things. You don't want to have too many things. Once you have those themes, I want you to sit down and write a simple vision statement. It could be 3 to 4 sentences, something really simple, creating a vision statement. And don't make it perfect. Just write down, based on your core values, this is who I am. This is how I want to live my life. And then under that vision statement, I want you to create a mission statement. And the mission statement's different in that a mission statement contains really actionable items that you're going to do to live out your vision. So you're going to write down maybe 2 to 3 things you're going to really work on to get closer to your perfect day, to get closer to the vision you want for your life. And here's a tip for all of this. Don't try to be perfect. Trying to be perfect is going to kill this exercise for you. And the minute you feel like you failed, you're going to stop doing it. So just get something down on paper. This is a working document. It's a working statement. Just get something going. So that's number one. This is one of the most important things that I see that is helpful for men in ministry to really thrive, creating a personal vision statement for their life by looking at their perfect day and by looking at what's that vision and creating that statement and having some actionable steps that they can take. It's the first thing. If you do this, trust me, you're going to be light years ahead of most of the men in ministry that I work with. Number two, about this idea of how to reconnect to your identity. When you got into ministry, you probably felt this calling, and there's a deep calling that who you were needed to be lived out in the context of ministry. And what happens for many people in ministry, many men in ministry over time, is that they start to feel disconnected from their original call, or the work that they're doing in ministry feels disconnected from who they are. They had ideas and visions that ministry would look like this, and it ends up looking like this, and they get far away from that calling, and they feel discouraged, and they feel depressed, and they feel anxious. And we're going to talk about really understanding who you are and connecting to your identity. And we're going to look at 2 things. I'm going to help you identify your stuck zone, and then I'm going to help you identify your life-giving zone. I'll tell you what those 2 things are. But as we do that, get another quote from Edwin Friedman, and you can read through it yourself. But he says that really one of the biggest issues for people, and especially leaders, is that they have unresolved or unsolved issues in their families of origin, the families that they grew up in, or in their ministry. And what happens is that you and I, we are, in many ways, I don't want to say this but this is what the phrase that's coming to my head. We're kind of the sum total of all the experiences that we've had, for good or for bad. Right now, a lot of it is based on what we've experienced. And that's just the way we are. That's how God has created us, and we have certain life experiences that shape us in many ways. And that's great. The danger is if we're not aware of that and how those things have shaped us for good or bad, and we just go into life not paying attention to that. And so one of the things that we know from all of the brain studies and neuroscience research today is that you and I, our brains were shaped in huge ways, really powerful ways, somewhere between the ages of 6 and 16, often before the age of 6. And they're shaped based on experiences, that when we experience certain things in those early years, certain feelings were triggered, maybe feeling alone or feeling loved or feeling not good enough or feeling capable. We had different feelings for good or bad. And based on those feelings, we learned how to cope. Maybe when we felt unloved, we would withdraw or we'd get angry. Or maybe when we felt encouraged or we felt capable, we would be engaging and we would encourage others. So those experiences are powerful and they shape us in some way. And there's a pattern that's developed over time. And so we're going to talk about that and how understanding that is really helpful and influential to understand for you as a leader. And I'm going to start by doing this little exercise. I want you to begin to think about this. What do you normally feel when, I have some questions for you, you have an argument with your spouse, for example, if you're married, or when your kids don't listen, if you're a father, or when someone in your church is upset with you, or when something in your ministry doesn't go well, or when you just feel stuck? What are some of the feelings that you experience when those things happen? And if you're like a lot of men, and I'm one of those who can be put in this category, we often sometimes don't feel like we're really capable of understanding some of our feelings. We're not in a culture that encourages men to have feelings often or to have language to talk about it. It's often seen as a sign of weakness. One of the whole reasons I wrote that book, my book in March, what it means to be a man is I work with so many men who come into my office who don't know what they feel, and they have no language to talk about it, and it leads to depression and anxiety and anger. And so I want to help men begin to talk about that in healthy ways that will lead to growth and lead to positive change in their lives, and that will help the relationships they're in. And so what are some of the things that you feel? And so one of the ways I'm going to help you think about this is I'm going to do what I do with men in my counseling office often, and that is I give them a piece of paper to look at with a bunch of feeling words on it. And I want to do the same for you. And these words are taken out of the work of Terry Hargrave in 5 Days to a New Marriage and his book Restoration Therapy. And as men begin to look at these words, they go, wow, this is how I feel. I feel this and I feel this. And they're able to identify how they feel, because for the first time they have words for it and language for it. I can tell you that the words that jump out for me are the words not good enough and the words alone and abandoned, and why those are powerful. For my mom died of breast cancer when I was 11. She had it for 5 years. And so I grew up with this feeling of feeling alone and abandoned at times and not good enough, because I became a perfectionist in that time. The best grades I ever got in life started when my mom died, and became this high achiever. And so I always felt like I wasn't good enough. And so I wonder what words jump off the page for you. And here's what I want you to think about. When you feel those things, what do you normally do? Like, what kind of behaviors? What would I see? What would people say about you? When you feel, for example, alone or like a failure or disrespected. I'm going to give you some more words to look at. Again, the words come from the work of Terry Hargrave there below. I'll tell you what I do. I tend to withdraw and shut down. I tend to, and this is an ugly one, I tend to pout. It's an ugly, ugly feature of mine. And I began to realize as I began to do my own work and get my own help with a counselor and therapist is that this pattern that was playing out in my life today, in my marriage, and as a leader in my ministry, had been playing out my entire life since I was a little kid. I just was never aware of it. And that's what the crazy thing. We end up living out who we are and the experiences we have often for most of our life or late in our life unless we become aware of it and learn how to do something different. So what would people say about you? Are you the leader who gets angry again, or is sarcastic, or is arrogant, or withdraws, or numbs out? Or do you struggle looking at porn? What do you normally feel and what do you normally do? This is what I call your stuck zone, because it's just a place in life where you get stuck. There's different words for it, different language. Terry Hargrave calls it the pain cycle. Terrence Real is an author, talks a lot about men and works with men in marriage, calls it the crunch. Demon Dialogues is the name that Sue Johnson, a marriage and family therapist, gives it. Gary Smalley calls it the fear dance. This is your stuck zone. It's important and essential that you understand what your stuck zone is. It's first of all your stuck zone. Well, it stinks to be in a stuck zone, so what do? Do we have to live our life in this stuck place? No, there's something actually really powerful we can do as leaders and as men in ministry to be different, to do something different, to be the leaders that are self-differentiated, to be the leaders that God has called us to be. And that is really understanding and connecting to truth about you. I might even say capital T. What's the truth about you? And so questions are, even in conflict, even when things aren't going well, what do you anchor your identity to? Do you anchor it to what people say about you and affirmation and pleasing people, or do you anchor it to something deeper? Or what do you believe to be true about yourself at that deep, deep inner core, that deep inner sense of self? And maybe how do those who love you, maybe friends or spouse or kids, see you? How do they see you? What would they say? What's the truth about you? And last, this can be hard. And you would think for people in ministry this would be easy, but in my experience working with people in ministry, especially men in ministry, this is the hardest question for them to answer. They can logically get it and answer it, but they don't believe it often. And that is, how does God really see you? What would God say? I'm going to give you some words again from the work of Terry Hargrave to think about and play around with. And this may take some time. So if you can't get it on this webinar, spend some time after the webinar for the next couple of days, next couple of weeks, next couple of months working on this. So it's a lifelong task, really. I can tell you that what I came to realize as I worked on my truth was that I was good enough. I didn't have to be perfectionist. I came to the truth that I was loved and that I was not alone. Even though my mom had died, that I was not alone. There were people around me, that God had not abandoned me, that my family had not abandoned me. You know, and I came to also this truth of that I'm God's son. And because of that, I can be the leader and be the man in ministry that I need to be. And so when you're in that truth, I wonder what strengths emerge. What are some of the actions, the qualities that people see in you when you're connected to your truth? It's very different than when you're in your pain, right? When you're in that stuck zone. When you're in your truth, different things happen. Well, I can tell you that when I'm in my truth, when I feel loved and I feel not alone, and when I feel I'm God's son and I realize I'm not abandoned, I'm an encourager. I'm giving. I'm loving. I'm a good listener, and I'm curious, and I'm engaging. I don't withdraw. I don't pout. I don't shut down. There's a lot of things that I'm not good at. If you were in my ministry, you would know I was not probably the greatest or best preacher, and wasn't the most skilled at admin. But I think my college students and those I did ministry with and served with would say, man, Rhett cared about us. He was loving and he was encouraging. That's my strength out of my truth. And so what do we want to call this? We'll call this your life-giving zone. It goes back to being a life giver. When you're in your stuck zone, you are a life taker. When you are in your truth and your strengths emerge, you're in that life-giving zone. Very different. And so here's a practice exercise. I want you this week to begin to identify your stuck zone. Just become aware of it. Pay attention to it. Notice it. Most people don't even notice it. So if you begin to notice it, that is huge. Then I want you to pay attention to your life-giving zone. And here's an exercise to do, and just a tip. I have this huge lamp in my office that hangs over my couch, and I usually, at times, walk over to it and stand underneath it when I ask a guy to do this exercise. And I say, I tell him when I'm standing under this lamp, it shines a light on me. It shines a light on everything, and it brings to light things about me that I don't see often. And so I encourage the guy to pretend like he walks out of my office, literally with a big lamp over his head, a big spotlight, which is going to encourage him just to look closely at who he is, pay attention to what he's feeling and what he's doing, notice what's going on inside of him. I want you to do that. And over the next few days, next few weeks, next few months, I want you to catch yourself when you get in your stuck zone. I want you to understand what are those feelings you're feeling, to give language to them, to talk about them, and to notice when you're in that stuck zone what you do. Do you get angry, or do you withdraw, or do you shut down porn? And then I want you, as you notice yourself getting in your stuck zone, I want you to see if you can connect to your life-giving zone, connect to your truth, and watch your strengths emerge. And if you do this exercise, you, again, will be light years ahead of not only most men I know, but especially men in ministry. It's an important task, because understanding who we are and where we get stuck and where our life-giving zone is essential to helping us reconnect to our identity and reconnecting to our vocation and who we are. There's, one of the things I write in my book, and I've written some articles, is that there is a deep connection to our identity and knowing who we are in the work that we do. In fact, that word for work, this idea of finding a vocation. Vocation comes from the Latin voce, which means voice, which is a summons. We're called to something, and I write about that in the book, what it means to be a man. And so when we're summoned to something, we're called to something. But we're called to something that is deep within us. Something deep within us is called to something. So, for example, in the book of Genesis, in Genesis 2, Adam, right, is called to tend the earth and take care of the earth. That's his calling. And his calling is really tied to who he is, a sense of identity. Here is a guy who is taken from the earth, right? He's taken from the very earth there, and then he's called to go back and take care of that earth. Who he was and who he was created from is his main calling, to go back and take care of that. So who you, especially in that life-giving zone, is out of that place that we're called to do the ministry that we're called to do. It's a deep, deep connection. I want you to understand that, how important that is. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is taking care of yourself. And really, in my mind, this is the underpinning of many things. If you don't take care of yourself, it's hard to have a personal vision and to live that out. If you don't take care of yourself, you're going to be in the zone most of the time. It's hard to be in that life-giving zone when you're not taking care of yourself. And we're going to talk about self-care, and I'm going to tell you 4 areas of self-care. Now, first of all, self-care is a word that few people get confused about. They think, well, self-care means you're asking me to go self-indulge and sit in a spa and, get my nails done or something. Or, right, if self-care for me is going to play golf every day for 8 hours, that's self-care. And no, that's not what self-care is. Self-care is not about indulging. Self-care is not about being selfish. Self-care, number 1, is about identifying your own needs. What do you need for your life? Or some of your needs, maybe even some of your wants. The need to be loved, the need to get some exercise, the need to have some downtime and quiet time, the need to God. Self-care is also about being able to receive from others. We can't do everything on our own in life. And I think people in ministry sometimes get stuck in this place of never being able to receive help. We're constantly trying to give help, but it feels too vulnerable for us to give help, to actually receive, to be cared for. I think about sometimes the whole symbolic act of washing one's feet. I know many ministry leaders who love washing other people's feet as an act of service, but would never let anyone else wash their feet. They're unable to receive. So self-care is about receiving from others. Self-care is also about giving to others. We take care of ourselves because ultimately we want to give to other people. We can't give to others if we have nothing to give. One example I like to think about, and we'll put this in the context maybe of some type of ministry or service work, is let's say you're working on some type of project, a housing project, and you're mixing cement, and so you have to get water to mix the cement, and so you're running buckets of water of like a little reservoir or pond over into the cement to mix it up. And so you spend all day running buckets of water over, and eventually you realize you get to this reservoir and there's no water left. And so you have nothing left to put in the cement, and you can't finish the project. And so you can't give what you don't have. There's no water to give. The same thing is with our life. When we don't take care of ourselves, we don't have anything to give. We're empty. We have no buckets of water left, and we can't give people, we can't give to the task we want to be about. And so self-care ultimately is about being able to give back to others. It's about being able to love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't love yourself, you don't take care of yourself, you have nothing to give other people, nothing to give in ministry. And so there's 4 areas I'm going to talk about. And I talk about these in my book, chapters 10 and 11, what it means to be a man. Or if you haven't, pick it up, and I go into more detail. But I talk about physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. There are other areas as well. I've seen as many as 7, 8, 9 areas of self-care, but these are the 4 that I talk about often. And I say, in my book, we care for ourselves not because we are selfish, but so we can give life to others. Otherwise, we suck the life out of people around us. Again, we don't take care of ourselves, we become a life taker, a life sucker, really, versus a life giver. And so what are these 4 areas? I'll run through them here pretty quickly. Taking care of our physical life. That's like exercising and eating healthy and getting sleep and rest. And so what's something you do in this area to take care of yourself? Do you eat healthy? Do you run? Do you go to the gym? Do you pick up basketball? What is something you do? Emotional self-care. It's what we do to take care of our heart, kind of, those people around us. How do we foster those relationships? So emotional, relational self-care, essentially. Those are things like date nights with our spouse or somebody we're dating. It's making intentional time to connect with people like our kids or our friends or people in ministry. It's being present with people. So what's one thing you really practice in this area of emotional self-care? And what about mental self-care? So these are things that we do to take care of our intellectual life, that stimulate our intellect. Maybe reading classes or listening to podcasts or engaging in deep conversation. And I think one of the dangers in ministry is we spend a lot of time in just ministry-type activities like going to conferences and reading ministry books. And we don't stimulate our intellect often with other things like reading a novel or, listening to a podcast is not related to ministry or business or leadership or, some type of marketing or theology. What's one thing you practice in this area? And then last, spiritual self-care. Again, here's another danger. Many pastors report, many people in ministry report that they say their time spent with God is in their sermon prep, or is in their praying for other people, or is in their planning a mission activity. That many people in ministry have very little of their own spiritual life. It's usually set in the context of ministry and the task of doing work. And so I would say that's a dangerous place to be as well. And so what do you do for your own spiritual life? What kind of faith community do you participate in? What does your prayer life look like and your life of worship? And do you spend time just listening? And for me, exercising actually is a deep connection spiritually, especially when I run. My head gets cleared and I can really spend time listening and praying. And so what's one thing you practice in this area of spiritual self-care? So here's an exercise. I want you to make 4 columns on a piece of paper. And going left to right, I want you to write physical in the first column, emotional in the second, mental in the third, spiritual in the fourth. And I want you to write down just one thing you can immediately start doing in that area. And here's the tip. Just focus on one thing and work on that one thing in each category for the next 30 days to see if you can build a habit. Look for building a habit and look for a healthy rhythm each week. Don't overwhelm yourself and put a million things, and then the first sign of not doing it, you feel like a failure, and then you just don't do it at all anymore. And here's how it looks for me. I've done a little demonstration for you. Yes, I have more than one thing in each area, and that's because I've been working on this for a long time, and I don't do all those all the time in each area, but those are some of the things that I usually try to be about. And some of those things I don't do every day. I don't run every day, and I don't have a date night with my wife every day. But I do really try to connect with God in some way every day. And I do try to connect with my wife and my kids some way every day. And I have different books that I like to read. And, so you can get a good sense of what I'm talking about here in this exercise. And I'd like you to do this same exercise for yourself. And so let's wrap up this webinar and talk about what we've really discussed. We've looked at the barriers to ministry leaders getting the help they need and what that results in, right? It ultimately results in often being burned out and being people pleasers and being anxious and depressed, and can lead to failure in our marriages and our relationships. And so we need to get the help that we need. I know I'm really beating a dead horse here, but we've got to really get help for those of us who are in ministry so we can have a long ministry and a healthy ministry and really continue the work that we've fully been called to. We looked at why I think ministry leaders need a personal vision statement. We've looked at why I think ministry leaders need to understand their stuck zone and their life-giving zone so they can connect their identity or reconnect to it, really connecting their identity to their vocation in a sense. And last, we looked at why it's important for ministry leaders to take care of themselves. When you don't take care of yourself, you end up empty and dry. A dry well has no life to give, and that's a bad place to be. When in my own ministry, when I was empty and didn't take care of myself, I was coming home on edge, and I wasn't a very good husband and a very good father and a very good friend and very good at my work. I was on edge. I was tired. I was exhausted. I was moody. I was anxious. I had to start taking care of myself to become a better leader. And so I'm going to leave you with a couple questions. And my main question is, are you really willing to overcome some of these fears that you have in getting the help that you need? I don't know what your fear is. Maybe you're fearful of the hard work that's ahead. Maybe you're fearful of failing. Maybe you're fearful of what you'll see when you begin to look at yourself, and that can be scary. And really, are you willing to overcome these things to be the leader that you need to be the leader in ministry that God has called you to be? And if you are, there's many things that you can do. You can get some help in your local community, talking to a pastoral counselor, talking to a licensed counselor or therapist, being part of some type of maybe a life coaching group. There's a lot of things you can do. You can begin to work on your self-care. One of the things that I started thinking about several months ago is I wanted to be able to offer men in general and also men in ministry an opportunity to get the help that they need, and to do it in a way that they could do it online without maybe having to go into an office. I wanted to help kind of overcome some of their fears of going into a counseling office. And I didn't want it to drag out for months and months for them. I wanted them to dive in deep. It would be a quick fix in a sense. You know how I am against quick fixes often. But could they dive in deep for a couple of months and then take what they learned in a couple of months and apply that over the long haul? So it seems like a quick fix and it lasts 2 months, but really it's a lifelong journey. And so I put together a program that I thought this will help men and also men in ministry get the help they need. I want every man to move into 2014, every man in ministry to move out in 2014 to be a life giver, to be a man of action. So I created this online 60-day challenge, this reboot challenge, and it starts January 7th and goes through March 7th. 60 days, essentially 8 weeks. And there's a bunch of different components. It's 8 weeks or 6 days of homework that is delivered each Tuesday morning. You'll log online, get homework that I've created in the form of videos and worksheets and exercises, and you'll do the homework and you'll turn it in after the week, and I'll review some for you and talk about it with you. And you'll also get 2 hours of personal coaching with me anytime during those 60 days via phone or Skype, or if you're in the local area, we can meet in person. You'll have access to a private Facebook group with other participants. Facebook is ideal for this. If you're not on Facebook, there's some other things that I can help you with to be a part of that group. There's a 1-hour conference call that takes place each week with myself and the other men in the group. And if you can't attend, it's also recorded. It's a great time to interact and to get encouragement from other men. And there's also 1 week of unlimited Skype in week 7 when we really dial stuff in and really get ready to end our there. I'm going to help you in that second to last week really answer some questions and work through some things and encourage you. And so there's 1 week of unlimited Skype. Those are some of the components. Briefly, what it looks like in the first week, we look at who you are, and I help you really pull the hood up, if you will, and look deep down underneath and help you face yourself and look at the issues that you're struggling with and looking at who you are and how you're formed and shaped in your family history. In week 2, I'm going to help you really identify your stuck zone and life-giving zone and give you the language to work with and help you understand how you can use that day to day. In week 3, I'm going to help you identify your core strengths and values and help you craft a vision and mission statement. In week 4, I'm going to help you develop a strategy for self-care that is sustainable and life-giving. Week 5, I'm going to help you really understand the importance of being vulnerable and intimate in your relationships, not only in your personal life, but in your ministry, and some keys to practicing that. Week 6, I'm going to talk a lot about how to understand who you are and connecting your identity to your vocation. Week 7, it's going to help you really look at some of your fears and face your fears and put some intentional practices in place. And we're going to practice, so that when this program is over, not only do you have a lot of experience practicing in the 60 days, but you're going to move out after that and practice, and make some huge changes in your life. Week 8, going to put all the pieces together, and we're going to meet as a group online, and we're going to create a framework for intentional and sustainable action. I'm going to make some promises and commitments to each other so there's a sense of accountability. That's what outline looks like, and the benefits of a program like this is exclusive. Each time I do this, there's only going to be 4 guys, maybe 12 guys. The size is perfect because it's big enough that you get feedback from other people, not just myself, and you get encouraged and you're accountable, but small enough that it's personal. And you can really experience that. It's intense because it's 60 days, and you have homework, and you got to work on things. It's taught virtually, so you learn by doing the work and watching the videos and the worksheets, but you have to practice it. The work that I give and deliver, you practice. It's accountable, so you're accountable to me and the other men in the group. So there's some good pressure to really face ourselves rather than just ignore it. It's personal and interactive. Yeah, there's a lot of personal touches with myself and the other men in the program. And it's customized. Even though the program is built for men and men in ministry, you and I will spend some time on the phone before the program starts and during the program, really customizing it to what you need for your own life. There might be some specific issues you want to work on. Those are the benefits. And so I'm going to close with this. There's 3 types of guys that I've been seeing, right? I said there's 2 guys, a life giver and a life taker. But of those, there's 3 men that I often see. And one is there's the guy who's the passive bystander, and life just kind of happens to him. Doesn't really have a course or a direction. Doesn't really know how he ends up where he ends up. And life just kind of happens. Doesn't really take any initiative. Then there's the active bystander, which is actually kind of a dangerous place because that guy looks busy. This is the pastor, the minister who's busy reading books and going to conferences and busy, doing all kinds of tasks. But really, it just looks like busyness, and he's not really putting in the time to change himself and to work on himself. All the busyness is really a disguise for the not wanting to look at himself at a deep level and be the leader he needs to be. And then there's the men of action. Those are the guys, those are the leaders, those are the men in ministry who, man, they face their fears and they commit to change and they put all kinds of things in practice to move into their life long term, to being the men they need to be and who they feel God has called them to be. And they become life givers in not only their own life, but the life of those around them. And so if this is something that you're interested in doing, there's a web address below where you can apply to be a part of this program. I think it's an awesome opportunity. What is it going to cost you? What's the investment? You're going to spend 60 days working on it, and you're going to spend the rest of your life playing it out and practicing it. And it's going to cost you $1,500. It is an important investment that you can make in your life. I tell many guys in ministry, and I know this from my own experience, we don't think anything of spending money, going out to dinner with people or lunches or buying books for ourselves or buying a new iPad or computer for the ministry or going to 3 or 4 or 5 conferences a year and paying for hotels. We don't think anything about spending $1,500. So why is it we don't spend or aren't willing to spend $1,500 to work on ourselves, to work on the thing that is most important for us to have the most life-changing ministry that we can be a part of, and that is ourselves. Ministry, there's a lot of tools we can use, a lot of skills we can have, but if who we are is not working and we have issues and things are getting in the way of being effective, we've got to change that. And so I'm encouraging you, if it's something that you want to do, I want you to join the challenge and invest 60 days and $1,500 into this program. And there's a link right there where you can find out more about this challenge, and you can begin the process of applying to be in it, and I will contact you shortly after you apply, and we will get the ball rolling. Again, it starts January 7th through March 7th, and I'm excited that you could be a part of this and that you and I together can be a part of ministries that are life-changing, and we can encourage other men to be a part of ministries that are life-changing, and that ultimately we can be men who are life-givers. Have a good day, and I appreciate the time that you've taken to be a part of this. Thank you.